From the four corners of this land we call America the Beautiful, here is a fascinating look at the world around us. RV trips of adventure, discovery, and beauty to find some of the most beautiful and unique places, people, and events on American Odyssey. Join us now as we leave the freeways behind and head for the back roads of America to discover what's just beyond the next bend in the road. This is going to be a fun trip. From Hampton Beach in New Hampshire down the coast of Massachusetts to Cape Cod, with stops at Gloucester, Ann's Diner, a spooky castle, just enough of Boston to say we were there. You know how I dislike big cities. A step back in time at Plymouth Plantation, and then the Cape. A fun trip in a motorhome I think you'll enjoy. I call this one a Cape Cod caper on American Odyssey. This Odyssey starts here at Hampton Beach in New Hampshire as we travel south to cross the border on State Route 1A into Massachusetts, heading for Gloucester. Crossing the Newport River into Massachusetts, we parked the motorhome and grabbed a few shots of the town of Newburyport and its picturesque harbor. Newburyport was rather unique among Massachusetts seaports in the early days, in that she acquired considerable wealth without the aid of Oriental trading. This little town at the mouth of the Merrimack River became prosperous through shipbuilding, fishing, West India and European trading, distilling, and manufacturing. Even today, the harbor looks much as it did over 100 years ago, and that's quite pleasing to the eye. After leaving Newburyport, we went through the small towns of Newbury and then Rowley. Here in Ipswich, things began to look very New Englandish, if I can use that term. A cast iron fence, for instance, very New Englandish, I'd say. Ipswich grew up as primarily a shipbuilding town, but here again, as with the entire coast of Massachusetts, fishing was big business. A pretty little town and worthy of at least a day of personal exploration. We left Route 1A and followed Route 133 to Essex, where we spotted Ann's Diner. Now, here's something I haven't seen since I was a sticky-fingered little door slammer. We just had to take a closer look and maybe order some ham and eggs, sunny side up with home fries. You know, one of the things I've noticed on the East Coast is that they serve home fries rather than hash browns like I'm used to out west. Well, that's just fine with me because I like home fries much better anyway. These diners are now between 40 and 60 years old. You know, there are people who seek out these old relics of the past, and there's even a roadside diner newspaper. The roadside diner has become a sacred piece of Americana, thanks to the demise of the passenger segment of the American railroads after World War II. Ah, the smell of salt air. Now we're entering Gloucester. If I were to pronounce it the way it's spelled, it would come out Gloucester. But then, when you're a guest here in New England, like we are, You allow them their little incongruities of the English language and go with the flow. Ah, such a pretty little town, Gloucester. We had a very tasty and reasonably priced seafood dinner on the waterfront, which around here is not hard to do. Throughout the year, many annual events mirror the character and traditions of Cape Ann, which includes the towns of Rockport, Essex, and Manchester, as well as Gloucester. Down at the docks of Inner Harbor, my attention was drawn to the two-masted schooner Adventure. We were invited aboard, and the conversation inevitably turned to whether or not the crew had ever seen sea serpents.
In fact, I contributed to the tradition. A friend of mine, an artist friend of mine, has since passed, built a 10-foot head and 12-foot tail for my 17-foot rowboat, and we took her out for a week after dark and roamed the waterfront, only passing the local bars after dark. And for some reason, rum and sea smoke have a way of developing traditions of sea serpent sightings. So we tried to contribute whenever we could to that.
And most of them on a Friday night.
Most of them on a Friday night, right after the keg was popped.
The schooner Adventure was built in nearby Essex in 1926, and when she wore out her aging crew in 1956, she was retired. After Coast Guard certification, she will again sail from her home port, giving passengers the thrill of crewing a tall sailing ship on the open seas. Now, wouldn't that be an exciting experience? Doggone it, I just wish we had more time to explore Gloucester and the rich and dramatic history of this colorful fishing village, but we're travelers, and there's much more to see on our way to the Cape. A few miles out of Manchester, a strange apparition appeared, the famous Hammond Castle. Our trip wouldn't be complete without exploring what appeared to be a Frankenstein castle in the midst of New England. There might even be some frightening characters here. Just as I thought. Here's the first one now.
Follow me through my castle, please. Welcome, my friend, to the Hammond Castle. Won't you be my guest?
The organ is being played by a computer, much like a player piano, but I couldn't resist hamming it up as much as possible. The day we dropped by the castle, they were getting it ready for the annual Halloween costume ball, so we thought we'd have some fun with the props. Actually, the castle was built in the early 1920s by John Hammond, a prolific inventor. Mr. Hammond was an eccentric millionaire with more patents to his credit than anyone in America except Thomas Edison. He had many of the castle's artifacts shipped over from Europe, including the stone archway that came from Pompeii, Italy. If you visit Hammond Castle, be sure to allow time to see it all. Well, after the Hammond Castle, it's only proper that we should stop in Salem to check out the Witch Museum. I met a guy who still shaves with a straight razor.
I cut myself shaving rather severely.
I noticed that.
I'm going back to self-lubricated blades.
We weren't allowed to film in the Witch Museum because, well, they didn't want us to reveal their witchcraft presentation. And that's fair enough. That's the museum show, and I don't want to steal their thunder. That way, it will leave something for you to do when you come to Salem. There is a small charge to see the show, but the gift shop and some exhibits are free. I was told that if I followed the red line painted on the sidewalk, it would take me to the House of Seven Gables within walking distance. I need help, desperately. The House of Seven Gables was built by Captain John Turner, a merchant mariner. As his fortunes grew, the house he built became a mansion, luxurious for its time in the 1670s. In 1851, inspired by this house, Nathaniel Hawthorne penned a brooding Gothic romance which became a classic of American literature. Here one can experience what life was like in early Salem. History and literature come together in a setting of tranquil beauty. This is one of many inspiring things to do and see in old Salem town. Somebody locked me in here and then went to lunch. The metropolis of Boston is no place to take an RV through, and for that reason, we're going to circumvent the city of Boston on the way to our next destination. Now, if you really want to see Boston, I suggest parking your RV here in Salem and taking one of the many wonderful guided tours that are available. Next, we go on board the Mayflower II at Plymouth, and then we go back to the 17th century at the Plymouth Plantation. I think everyone can recall the name of the captain of the Starship Enterprise, Captain Kirk, wasn't it? But how many know the name of the captain of the Mayflower? You give up? Well, you can find out here at Plymouth, where she landed in 1670 with 102 passengers and a crew of 57 after 66 days on the high seas. After getting permission to board her, I took a look around.
Not be here without me. I'll be Christopher Jones, master of this ship.
Permission to come aboard, sir.
You are aboard.
Well, thank you, sir.
Rather untimely to be making permission.
Where did you
Surely you're most welcome.
Are you from England?
Surely all of us be from England.
She was christened Mayflower II, a reproduction built in Brixham, England, and crossed the Atlantic in 1957 to be docked here in Plymouth, Massachusetts for your inspection. Once aboard, you'll have the chance to talk with men and women that have come forward from the year of 1620 to communicate with you their adventure. Next, we visit the Plymouth Plantation, and we'll go back in time when pilgrims struggled through their first year on American soil. Walking through the plantation area was like taking a walk back into the 17th century, where we could actually meet and talk with the people of that time.
Yes, all these chickens are friends of ours.
Indiana live on island to mouth of Hudson River, Massachusett. All Indiana, New England could be called Mohawk, could be called Wampanoag, for all are to east. Have you been down the Cape Side? Stratton Hook, yeah. Myself, but once. But twice. Once when I ship come to Stratton Hook. For all ship come this part of New World will come to Stratton Hook, then skim coast to north or south. So ship come to Stratton Hook. Then when come to here, come to place where town has house for trade upon south side of Cape.
You know, most people are not aware that the Mayflower's original destination was the colony of Virginia. It was the result of incompetent navigation that brought her first to what is today Provincetown, and finally to the present-day location of Plymouth on the shores of Massachusetts. Being thus arrived in a good harbor and brought safe to land, they fell on their knees and blessed the God of heaven above, who had brought them over the vast and furious ocean, again to set their feet upon the firm and stable earth. It is with these words that William Bradford described the arrival in New England of an intrepid group of colonists known as the Pilgrims. Things were a little different in those days. For instance, in the Pilgrim household, the adults sat down to dinner and the children waited on them. Today, it's the other way around. The Pilgrims, for instance, didn't use forks. They used a knife, spoon, a large napkin, and fingers. Today, we substitute a fork for the fingers, and the napkins are smaller. The Pilgrims thought lobsters were fit only for pigs. Today, I make a pig out of myself when I have a lobster dinner. By the way, the captain of the Mayflower was Christopher Jones. You thought I didn't know, didn't you? After leaving Plymouth, we were eager to investigate Cape Cod. Driving along Route 1A was a pleasure, with the tapestry of fall colors and the New England scenery unfolding before us. Early October is a wonderful time of the year to travel the back roads in any part of the country. We weren't sure what lays just beyond the next bend in the road. And that was half the fun of getting semi-lost. After crossing the Sagamore Bridge, we found ourselves in what's called Cape Cod country. This is the town of Sandwich. Where do they get those crazy English names? Just short of Barnstable is a tourist-oriented little place called the Yankee Craftsman, where I made a faux pas by pronouncing it Barnstable, and I was promptly corrected. Some people might call this a tourist trap, but that would not only be unkind, but it would be a bit unfair because I found the prices quite reasonable, and any store that carries jellies and relishes with the maker's personal name prominently displayed is okay in my book. The Brewster Country Store was like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting. And a young boy picking out a comic book made the picture complete. T.C. Mullen Glassworks, just a block from the country store, is something you've got to see for yourself. Tom Mullen, the owner, told me that some of this amazingly beautiful glassware takes up to 2 days from start to finish.
That's a simple, very simple.
Simple design,
Simple
but
design.
It's very effective.
That's what I wanted to do. It's not a,
If your interest is in the history of Cape Cod, then drop into the Sturgis Library, the oldest library in the United States, built in 1644.
Oh, Sue, this looks like it reeks of history. These books must be old.
Well, they are. They represent the 19th century collection that was here when the library opened in 1867, which is not as old as the building, which was here in 1644.
1644?
That's right.
Good heavens. Out west, if we have something that's 100 years old, we call it history. A history of Harvard.
Yes.
Is it Harvard or Harvard?
Well, I was raised in New York, so I'm a wash ashore, and I say Harvard. But those who were born and educated here would say Harvard.
Oh, no pictures, though. Included among the over 1,500 maps, old books, and the genealogical history of Barnstable is this Bible brought over from England in the 1600s. You'll notice the places where the candle wax had dripped on the pages and the words were penned in from memory. Here in Rock Harbor is where the local militia kept a British warship from landing in 1812. And it's a good fishing spot, too. Being a licensed ham radio operator with the call letters of W7FCB, I just had to have a look at the 1903 site of the first Spark Gap radio station at Marconi Beach. And you know, Marconi was also the first ham radio operator in the world. Well, we finally made it to the end of the Cape. This is Provincetown, where the Mayflower first touched American soil. They decided that this was not a good place for farming and homesteading, so they hoisted anchor and proceeded to Plymouth. Provincetown is a delightful place to roam. So many quaint little shops and restaurants. You could spend many pleasant hours exploring. It's a fun, crazy place with the extra dimension of summer crowds that enjoy being here. The Pilgrim Monument is a 252-foot tall granite tower with 116 steps and 60 ramps. I counted them on the way up. But if you can huff and puff your way to the top, the view is magnificent. I hope you enjoyed wandering along the coast of Massachusetts with us. I always have a hard time ending our American Odyssey shows. I wish we had more time together. I have so much more I'd like to show you. I guess you'll just have to join us again next time. You'll probably be just as surprised as I am to find out where we end up next. Sometimes I think anticipating can be much more fun than recollecting. As I drove along the back roads of New England, I became more and more aware of how lucky we are to have had the good fortune of living in a country that developed the way ours did. I thank God that our forefathers knew that we, as a nation, could not have become what we are by remaining what we were. This great America is the best country in the world, but it's not finished yet. We've still got some work to do, and we can start by learning to appreciate it on American Odyssey.